the Treaty of Amiens. It was signed on the 25th of March 1802, came into effect on the 27th of March, and lasted until the 18th of May 1803, so for 14 months. And it was the only time of general peace in Europe in these 14 months between 1793, around the time of the French Revolution, and 1814, the Battle of Waterloo. And it ended the wars of the Second Coalition, and one big thing was that Britain accepted France now as a republic after the French Revolution. And there were some people signing it. It was for Britain, was it the Marquis of Cornwallis? For France, it was Joseph Bonaparte, brother of Napoleon Bonaparte. For the Batavian Republic, that is somewhere where Belgium and the Netherlands are, the Batavian Republic, Rutger Jan Schimmelpenninck, and for Spain, José Nicolás César. And why was it made? Now, there were also humanitarian reasons. The Marquis of Cornwallis, for example, said that he didn't want to have continuous, helpless bloodshedding, for example. Or another thing was that the Prime Minister for domestic issues in Britain had changed in 1801 from William Pitt the Younger to Henry Edding. Now the people were starting to talking about how the treaty could be. And it wasn't going so well. The Batavian Republic is here written and quoted then that they were seen by the French. There was a lack of respect for them, that were seen as vanquished and conquered, and that they owned France everything. And also, Lord Cornwallis wrote that he wrote, "I feel it as the most unpleasant circumstance attending this unpleasant business that, after I have obtained his acquaintance on any point, that I can have no confidence that it is finally settled, and that he will not recede from it in our next conversation about Joseph Bonaparte." Now it was talking there. Was it Lord Hawkesbury on the British side, with Louis Guillaume Otto on the French side, the French Commissioner of War in London? But Louis Guillaume Otto was detailing the instructions of Napoleon, and so then Lord Hawkesbury opened the second line of communication with sending Anthony Merry to Paris to talk in the second line of communication with Talleyrand, Charles-Marie Talleyrand. And when we're talking, and then there were some things happening, why they had to sign now under pressure. And Britain was talking about the budget in the parliament. It's not said explicitly here, but it must be about on what money to spend in the next year, on military, if wars continued or not. And there was a huge pressure on Lord Cornwallis to sign or to not sign, which Lord Cornwallis seemed to not want, because he wanted peace. And during the peace, these 40 months, Britain then kept its large peacetime army. They did not demobilize of 180,000, I think, was it, troops. And also they used that year to build up the navy. And then they had given Lord Hawkesbury an ultimatum to sign, and then we're talking about Malta. Malta was the big issue. Who got Malta? It seemed to have been part of St. John's Holy Knights order, and then it became occupied by France. But then during the war, Britain had got it in. It was in the hands of Britain. And then we were talking about that, and then Lord Hawkesbury got an ultimatum to sign, and after then, shortly after the ultimatum had run out, after a 5-hour-long meeting, Lord Hawkesbury signed. And he said he was worried and unhappy with the treaty, but he also was not happy that the war would go on and it would be just hopeless, useless bloodshed. About the signing of this preliminary agreement, which was done then, there was a great joy in Europe. There were poems written in the languages German, English, French. And on the stage, people were acting it out, and fireworks were done in Britain. In Britain, the people hoped that the income tax, which had been imposed a few years earlier, would be gone away, that the market had a revival, and that the grain prices would go down. Some reasons for making the treaty were also on Britain's side, that they feared war with Russia, and that they wanted more trading with Europe. And now it was signed, and the people waited for it, wanted it. And another reason was that the mood was a bit changing in Britain about some people who wanted peace. Now read about the things which were happening in Europe with Napoleon, and they read about it in newspapers, more strong moralizing colors. It's written like that here. And that made the people who wanted peace also turn away. Lord Hawkesbury also saw that is what he saw. And so he had a pressure to come to peace before the public opinion would change. It was happening that France was involving stronger in the Batavian Republic. France was supporting a French general with a revolutionary coup d'etat, and also, I don't know something else, but that was. And they read about it and they saw that France was having influence, and that's also why the pressure to make that peace now. When the peace was, after some time it was then signed also the actual treatment. It was made 2 days later an addendum when saying that it was not, that it should not set a precedent, that it was written only in English and French and not in Dutch probably and in Spanish of the other signatory parties, that should not set a precedent for future contracts or treaties. And also then that some titles were said wrong, that is not part because of prejudice or something. Now some things were done about the Cape Colony in South Africa, who got it, about Malta, that it stays a bit longer British, but that Britain should retreat when other things with Trinidad should become a part of Britain. That was allowed to Spain. Spain's allegiance with France came a bit under pressure during the time. One reason was that Spain wanted that, or had hoped that France would block that Trinidad, an island in the Caribbean, would not become British, which France didn't block. And now Spain, for example, the economy in Spain is recovered during that time, for example. Now, and then there was this 14 months of peace, and traveling in Europe started again. Expatriates came back to France now under released restrictions who had fled during the French Revolution or something. And people also came, some people named here the name. William Herschel, for example, went to the Observatoire in Paris probably to make astronomy or something. And Marie Tussaud got to London and opened the second exhibition as Marie Tussaud, so she had in Paris. Or André Jacques Garnier went also to London and flew with a hot air balloon from London to Colchester in 45 minutes. And there was in the Louvre in Paris the Exposition des Produits Français de l'Industrie or something. And Napoleon, the private secretary of Napoleon, said then that Napoleon was above all delighted about the numerous foreigners who expressed their delight about the exhibition. But it was not all perfectly. There were some problems. Malta was a big problem all the time. Now, but also other diplomatic problems. Britain felt insulted that France or Napoleon said that Britain had no voice in Europe. And also should Britain censor the anti-British press. And also should they expel and expatriate people who had gotten there. Expel them. And Britain saw this as an affront against their sovereignty. And King George III, I think was also an elector of a Holy Roman Empire. This is where Germany is. And they felt insulted for that. Then more things. Napoleon had made the Treaty of Lunéville a year earlier to the Treaty of Amiens. Britain had not signed it. Napoleon had signed it, and in that he had said that he would not accept the presidency of the Italian Republic in northern Italy, which he then did, and he became the president of northern Italy. And also sent troops into the Helvetic Republic in Switzerland and occupied it. And also a stronger influence than more on the Netherlands. And he dispatched naval ships or something, to regain revolutionary Haiti in the Caribbean. And also to take control again or still, of French Louisiana. Louisiana was then sold by Napoleon to the United States, to the Thomas Jefferson administration. Other things which Napoleon also did was to make the Napoleonic Codes with the Concordat. He made peace with the Vatican. That was one thing said, for example, in the treaty, that he should retreat from the Kingdom of Naples and from the Papal State and from Egypt also. That has been also a big issue when the treaty breaks down. So Napoleon made the Concordat to make peace with the Vatican, the Napoleonic Code, with that he did something, and also a new constitution. A new Napoleonic Code making a new legal system in France, and a new constitution with which he became emperor of lifetime. Now, and when these were the promises. So Britain saw themselves threatened, insulted, and also threatened on the global stage by France's imperialistic actions which they did. and also that they had nothing to say in Europe, and that France was not holding to the Treaty of Luneville, but they attacked Switzerland and accepted the presidency of Italy. And we saw that France was weak. Britain kept a large peacetime war army and did not demobilize and built out its navy. And when the war started again, Britain was in the Battle of Trafalgar very quickly able to regain an upper hand on the oceans with the Battle of Trafalgar a bit later. And they saw that France was in a weakened position also. And now, then there became more diplomatic problems. So Britain saw it, what was happening in Europe with Napoleon, and then they seized on the Malta issue. It's written like that. They seized on the Malta issue. They had signed in the treaty that they would retreat from Malta within 3 months, and they didn't do it. And Napoleon pressed them on it. He published a report in which he stated how easily he could regain Egypt or take Egypt. That was something similar which he did. And then also later he said then to Lord Whitworth, which was the British-French ambassador, in an interview that Britain should retreat from Malta, and he threatened war. And Lord Whitworth felt like he had gotten an ultimatum that war would come if not Britain would go away. And so he said how easy he could get Egypt, and that he would have war if Britain would not retreat. Britain was seeing that he was having actions in Switzerland, in the Helvetic Republic, in the Batavian Republic, with the influence on Netherlands or whatever it is, Belgium. I don't know if just what it takes. And these things. And then it got more and more. Then Napoleon said then also in a public meeting again, where other people were there, pressured he again onto Malta. And that saw now the Russian ambassador, Markov, and he reported then back to Russia, to the Tsar, that France was threatening. And also did he report then back to Russia that France was, rumors that France would had taken an eye on Hanover and on Hamburg in northern Western Germany. And following that, then the Russians accumulated, assembled troops in the Baltic because of the threats of Napoleon then to Western Germany, because Russia saw it as now that would now be part of their business if Napoleon would be doing something then in Western Germany. It was not Germany at the time. And then Britain made an ultimatum to France, and saying that France would retreat from Switzerland and something else, and that Malta would be staying part of Britain for 10 more years. Napoleon said then that he would accept the Ottoman Empire's, so that Turkey is, the Ottoman Empire's integrity. That had probably something to do with Egypt, that he would not attack Egypt again. The British troops were also, there was war led something. I don't know, just from this article. But he did not accept that on Malta. And when it got worse, they were talking again under big pressure that war was imminent. And then on the 17th May, then Britain seized all the ships, all the French and Dutch ships in the ports and at the coast. On the 18th May, then war was declared on France, naming the region as reason the hostile actions against the Empire, the West Indies, and Britain. And then on the 18th May, war was declared again. France then also arrested all male British people. Some were taken as prisoner for over 10 years then, until all the wars, the Napoleonic Wars, had ended. And then the war got on again. This time Austria and Russia joined the coalition against France. And at that time also, shortly before the war started, France was again making signs that they would attack Britain again. Now here's the text that is written like that. Napoleon didn't feel ready to attack again, to make war again. So he showed signs that he was preparing again an invasion of Britain. It never happened that Napoleon invaded Britain, but he had made preparations early or something. And now he made signs that he would do it again. When the seizing all Dutch and French ships, I don't even know if that news made it to Napoleon. So and then one day later on the 18th, then declaration of war against France. France arresting all the people who were English, how big of an impact it was, it's not really here. And when in secret the Grand Army of Napoleon was marched away from France, from Normandy, where we were assembling to pretend that we would attack England, to Ulm and defeating there the Austrian army. And then one day later is the Battle of Trafalgar, where Britain wins with the ships against Admiral Nelson against Spain and France. But then the next battle comes at Austerlitz, and where Napoleon wins then, but the wars go on for over 10 years. And then there is the Battle of Waterloo then in 1814, and where Napoleon is then defeated. And the Treaty of Amiens are these 14 months in between these 30 years of war in Europe. And that is according to the Wikipedia article of the Treaty of Amiens, but the views and positions mentioned here in the article don't necessarily align with my own or with the entities spoken of. Heinrich, I'm trying to learn history. Today the Treaty of Amiens. After we've done it, we're gonna do extensor carpal analysis strength training. And if you participate in the extensor carpal analysis strength training, then it's at your own risk. And this is part 27, 28 or something. It's a pretty big subject, and we try to make it in detail to really understand at least everything explained here. So, and we're right now going through our presentation of what we would say in our presentation about it, which we want to do completely from memory. So we want to say the Treaty of Amiens, maybe we want to study with it. Who signed it? It was on the British side, it was the Cornwallis of the Marquis of Cornwallis. On the France side, it was Joseph Bonaparte, the brother of Napoleon Bonaparte. On the Batavian Republic, which is where the Netherlands are, was at Rutger Jan Schimmelpenninck, and on the side of the Spanish, it was José Nicolás de Azar. It was signed on the 20th of March 1802, came into effect on the 27th March 1802, and lasted until the 18th May 1803, when Britain declared war on France, naming as the official reason the continuous hostilities of France against Britain. Let's look what is said here. France imperialist policies in the West Indies, Italy and Switzerland. The continued hostilities of France imperialist policies in the West Indies, Italy and Switzerland. And I want to say, what was it even? It was the only period of general peace in Europe lasting 14 months between 793 and 1814. So the French Revolution up until Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo. I think it was since 1798. And it ended the wars of the Second Coalition, which had waged war against the Revolution of France since 1798. Okay, there we have it. What were some reasons why to sign the treaty? Was, for example, also humanitarian reason, whatever. By Lord Cornwallis, the signer of the British Party, for example, said that he was worried about the ruinous consequences of continuing this bloody and hopeless war. A bit paraphrased, but pretty exactly. But also other reasons. Britain, for example, wanted more trading with Europe. And more are we not named, one reason more. And also was Britain fearing war with Russia. Now, in some place we try to say also that it is the English Wikipedia entry. Maybe the French one would look a little bit different. Because I just noticed, again, here only British reason named for the piece. Maybe the French Wikipedia entry would name French one. Now, and it doesn't make sense to say what happened when we're going to start with early diplomacy. Now, then there was some diplomacy done. There was Lord Hawkesbury on the British side, and he was negotiating with Louis Guillermo Otto, the French commissioner to prisoner of wars in London. But he was under detailing the instructions of Napoleon, and so Lord Hawkesbury sent Anthony Merry to Paris to open a second line of communication with Charles-Marie Talleyrand. I don't know how to pronounce it. Charles-Marie Talleyrand. And do we have anything more? Then the next thing is, it was then signed on the 30th September 1801, the preliminary agreement. That is all. What do you want to say? Okay, then we don't want to say what was it, just how it goes on. We're going to say what was in the final agreement, and it's way too confusing. Now, it was greeted with great joy, the signing of a treaty, of the upcoming news of maybe of signing of a treaty. There were poems written in English, in French, and in German. Also on stage was acted out, fireworks were done. It was William the Pitt who introduced the income tax in England. Can we say that like that? It is said like that here. But it sounds a bit like we know it as a big fact. It's just said here, would lead to the withdrawal of the income tax imposed by Pitt. William Pitt the British Prime Minister, had imposed the income tax, and people hoped that it would go away again after the war had ended, or that the grain price would down and that the markets would be having a revival. Another reason why the treaty was possible was that because of domestic issues, the premiership of Britain had changed from William Pitt the Younger to Henry Allen. Now, and then goes this on here. What is the next thing? The final negotiations. We weren't so good going as maybe the celebrating, or what I don't want to say, but let's formulate it to the end. So good going as this celebrating and the great greeting of joy of the news of the possibility of signing a greeting might indicate. It was so that the British negotiator, the Marquis of Cornwallis, wrote, I feel it as the most unpleasant circumstance attending this unpleasant business that after I have obtained his acquaintance on any point, I can have no confidence that it is finally settled and that he will not recede from it in our next conversation. And also was a lack of respect from the French to the Dutch, the Batavian Republic, who saw them as vanquished and conquered and that they outwon everything. These are quotes. Okay, that is back. And then the next thing. Then, January 2, was it? In January 2, 1802, so 3 months between the preliminary agreement signing and the treaty, the signing, on the 20th of March. In January 1802, Napoleon accepted the presidency of the Italian Republic in northern Italy, which was against the Treaty of Luneville 1 year earlier. Britain was not a part of it, but it was still a sign showing that it makes sense to say that it's not written like that here, but it makes sense to say it. But it's indicated for many people that Napoleon would not hold to his signed treaties. And also was France having bigger influence in the Batavian Republic. The French general Pierre Augier, not that much wrong, Pierre Augier was supported by France, or by Napoleon, with his reactionary coup d'etat in September already, so before the preliminary agreement was signed, and also the new constitution of the Batavian Republic brought on by a sham election. And Lord Cornwallis again wrote again it's the British article, so it's a bit British talking the points here, said then, what can we say exactly, that this news was read about this news was read in Britain in newspapers in great moralizing colours. And Lord Cornwallis wrote that his country was, so British, was in greatest alarm about these, not evaluations, about these happenings, whatever, these happenings in Europe. What did he say? Greatest alarm in this country. That was a gross brief of faith. That is gross brief of faith that Napoleon was accepting the presidency of Northern Italy and having more influence in the Batavian Republic, and that the people who felt passive, who wanted peace, or pacified in Britain, getting now a revived spirit of war lust, of desires of renewing the war is increasing. Okay. We're not going to mention it. There was an idea to make just a treaty between Spain and Britain, but it was seen as the main treaties between Britain and France, Spain and the Batavian Republic as well signing. Okay, then the next thing. There was a big pressure on Lord Cornwallis to sign, because he was the one who said he was worried about the bloody and ruinous consequences of continuing a bloody and hopeless war. And also it was he the one saying that it created the greatest alarm in Britain. It's not said who is the greatest alarm. It just created the greatest alarm in the country. Does it mean he perceives it as the greatest alarm? Okay, it's not said directly. In Britain is greatest alarm. That is what he's saying. In Britain is greatest alarm about the evolvings, about the happenings, about the occurrences with Napoleon and accepting the presidency of Northern Italy, or the Italian Republic, and of the Batavian Republic. So, in the British Parliament, there was the budget discussion, and they wanted to have the budget done. He has not said why, but let's speculate a bit so that we can go on a little bit. He was said that Britain kept a big peace army of 180,000 troops during the peace, and that Britain used the time to build up the navy, the peace time, and the income tax was not taken down. It indicates that the budget was about how much money is spent on the war efforts or on the military. And so the budget was to be done, and Britain wanted to know the Parliament if the treaty would be signed and peace comes or war. I think we can say that it makes a lot of sense. It makes 100% sense, or more than 99%. It's very strong indicated, so we can say that. Then it's understandable with our easy words. Malta was the big problem. Who gets Malta? France had seized it in 1798 from the Order of St. John Hospitaller Knights, but Britain had it got through the war, occupied during the war. It's not said like that, but it reads it from a text like that out of it. So London was giving Cornwallis a hard line, 8 days to sign or now peace. And then 11 days later, after 5 hours of negotiations, he signed the deal. He was unhappy with the deal, but also worried about the ruinous consequences of renewing a bloody and hopeless war. The terms: exchange of prisoners and hostages, and we try not to mention so many, because it's too complex. We're not going to mention any at all. It doesn't really make sense. I don't understand half of these things here. So I don't know where French Guiana is exactly. It could be where Guyana is. So there's 3 countries, and one is, I don't know, one is French Guiana, the other one is Guyana, and another one is another place. They're in Southern America. I don't know if French Guiana is one of them. Ceylon, that is Sri Lanka. The Cape Colony, I looked it up, that is the Cape of Good Hope, that is South Africa. Today, South Africa. And Dutch Guiana. Is it in French Guiana, Dutch Guiana, and another Guiana? Who is the Papal States? Is it the Vatican? Who is the Kingdom of Naples? Is it the town Naples there's a big Vulcan. Is it the town Naples? And Trinidad, that is an island, that was below to Spain, but there's Gozo, there's Comino. Malta is in the Mediterranean Sea. I think almost in Africa, almost south of Sicily. Minorca is east of Spain, but there's the Septinsular Republic. That was something with the Netherlands, I think. But basically, he's also saying, withdraw the troops from France, that Britain would be doing that. But France was also there. And there's that one place written that it was part of the Ottoman Empire, which is Turkey today. So we're staying away from all these terms and mention only the ones which are necessary to understand it. They just agreed on a swapping of a bunch of different countries. For example, let's say the 2 or 3 things which you understand. Prisoner and hostage exchange, and the Cape Colony become part of Batavian Republic, which is today, I think, a part of the Netherlands. But what if it's Belgium? I don't know it. And the next thing would be Trinidad becoming British, not Spanish longer. Or stayed on becoming British. France withdrawing from Egypt was said in one place, from Naples and from the Papal States, which would be there. The Papal States are in the Vatican, that's very close, it's just 60 kilometers or something from Neapel to Rome. So these 4 examples. I am again over time. And then 2 days later, an addendum was signed, and then that was said that it should not set a precedent, that the treaty was not done in all the languages of the signatory parties, but just in English and French. That this should not set a precedent was said in the addendum, and that some titles were said wrong of some people should also not set a precedent. It was not a cause of prejudice and of intended. It was unintentional and not intended to be prejudicial. Okay. We have 2.5 stages left. We are pretty good for our presentation, but this is a big subject. It's a very big subject, and we have just this little part of information out of it, of such a big subject. So it's not so, I think that's why it's so complex. It's not every single one of them is one subject. About every one of them we could make a presentation, and we have just always 1 or 2 sentences to every of these subjects. And to understand it now in the whole context and bring it all together just with 1 or 2 sentences of each of these bigger subjects, I think it's something interesting. Okay, that was the history part. If you were here for history, you can go directly to the next part where you're going to do the same. You're going to start again from the beginning, go all through, up until the end, look if we come 1 page further. If you were here for that, you can go directly to the next part. If you stay here and participate in about 30 seconds extended cover strength training, please let it down. Well, I've just fists up and putting it down. We need so long to move on. And in and up, and then down, and up. No, we don't have time. We need to warm up for the other exercises. That was the extended couple of hours, stretching or whatever. If you were here for that, thank you very much. Otherwise, whatever, I don't know how the text goes on. I thank you very much.